and welcome to Your Vote Counts, a public service program for the Special District's May 18th election that is being produced by Capital Community Media via remote technology in collaboration with the community groups of American Association of University Women, League of Women Voters, Marion and Polk Counties, and Salem City Club. For the Salem Keizer School Board election, all candidates were invited and they all accepted. The candidate was asked to prepare a 2-minute opening statement telling about themselves and their qualifications for the elected positions. I am Sharon Krimmel from the League of Women Voters, Marion and Polk Counties, and I would like to introduce Liam Collins, who will now begin with his opening statement.
Hi, I'm Liam Collins. I am running for Salem Keizer School Board, Zone 7. I grew up in Ohio and moved out here my junior year of high school, where I went to Wesleyan High School. After graduating Wesleyan High School, I went to Willamette University, where eventually I graduated with a bachelor's in history, and then went to work at numerous different jobs in the private sector. I landed at Enterprise Holdings many years ago at this point, and worked my way up to vehicle acquisition manager. So what I do is fleet planning and logistics, which means I work with a whole large team of people that accomplishes all the movement that we have for vehicles, as well as analyze data. My wife and I, a couple of years ago, saw a need in the community for fostering teenagers. And so we decided to do that. And we've done that now for the past basically 2 years. And we've had 4 different kids, 3 of which were in the Salem Keizer School District. And within that time, we noticed that the kids weren't doing as well as we would have liked them to be and as well as they could have been. And so that kind of prompted the desire to run for the school board to help all sorts of kids who are also being, left behind, smart kids who are just not living up to their potential. In general, I have 3 issues. One is I want to get kids back to 5 days a week in-person classes, but I also think it's incredibly important that we maintain the online education option as well, because one of the kids does way better with that sort of option, and kids need to have a choice in that way. I want to see school resource officers return to the classroom, as I've seen the mentorship that really benefited one kid when that student resource officer went 20 miles out of his way and spent 2 hours outside of his normal shift in order to take care of her when she really needed it, when she was in crisis. And 3, I want to make sure that we're looking at data to make sure that we're putting resources into the right place.
Thank you for that information. The questions were developed by the sponsoring groups, and the candidates did not receive them ahead of time. The League has prepared 7 questions, and each candidate has 9 minutes in which to answer them. Not all questions need to be answered, but all the candidates will be given the same questions in the same 9-minute total time, which includes the time it takes to ask or repeat a question. The candidates' responses to the individual questions will not be timed. Now let's give candidate Liam Collins an opportunity to address some questions and topics of concern to our community. Our first question is, if elected, in what areas of the school board responsibilities are you particularly interested?
So I'm particularly interested in making sure that we do not have kids that the system is failing. Smart kids, and most kids really need to get the most out of the education, and we need to focus on that. And we need to look at data in order to determine how it is that we can benefit the most students. And something like COVID demonstrated that there are kids who learn better online in a non-classroom setting. So that's the sort of thing that needs to be an option. Like, we need a school system that can actually accommodate the needs of all the students, and not everybody learns in the same way. And we need to, as a community and as a board, make sure that the school district is giving those sorts of options to kids.
Our next question is, what effect do you think it will have to elect school board members by zone rather than at large?
So the zone and at large question is one of those interesting topics, because a school board member has to represent all the children within the district. But at the same time, it is very difficult to run a campaign that covers such a large and populous area. Effect-wise, I'm not really sure what effect, other than to make the elections itself easier and cheaper on the candidates, it will have. Because at the end of the day, I need to represent the kids who are in my zone, but we need to make sure that we're not leaving any kids behind, whether they're in my zone or somebody else's. And with it being the way it is currently, there's definitely a focus on all the kids. And I don't know whether that means there are sometimes zones that are being left behind or not. Like, to me, that's something we really need more data on, and we really need to study and determine what's going to be best for everybody, not really the candidates.
Our third question: in several places in the district policy for the school board, it states that there are to be regular opportunities for public feedback. How is this ensured, and what would you do differently, if anything?
So, I mean, the public definitely needs to take a role in how the school district is doing as a whole and what the school board should be doing. Things like attending meetings is definitely a part of that, making sure that the community is telling the school board members, as well as the superintendent to some extent, what exactly they want to see. And we need to make sure that everybody's being heard and given the opportunity, and that we then look at what exactly their concerns are. Because sometimes we all have concerns that we haven't backed up with data, and we come in with our own bias, and we need to make sure that we're looking at data to make sure that, you know, the concern itself is always valid, but how we address that concern, looking at the data, will really help us determine how to do that correctly.
Our fourth question is, what do you think about the decision to skip standardized testing this year?
I'm not a fan of the decision to skip standardized testing. I understand that the results aren't going to be necessarily in line with everything else, but I mean, I analyze data for a living as part of what I do. And it's not like I can ignore what has happened in the year of COVID, but I can't compare it directly to how it was prior to that. But it gives a baseline when we have that data, and not having that data seems to me to be something that can cause us to not necessarily react properly to what the kids need. Like, without the data, we don't know that kids need more in a particular subject. Maybe they're doing just as well in English overall and not as well in math, or vice versa. And so I would rather have had that data so that we actually know where we need to focus in order to correct the events that have come about because of COVID.
Question 5. What steps would you take to address the disparities in academic performance before the pandemic and now as we transition to in-school instruction?
We really need a system that is not just a one-size-fits-all school system. And we've seen that with COVID, because we've seen kids, I have one of them, who's doing better because they're not in an in-person classroom environment. Most kids need that in-person environment, but we need to make sure that we're reaching out to all of those kids and having a system, or really multiple systems, that can make sure that we're reaching every kid within the school system and making sure that they have the tools that they need in order to succeed. I want to continue upon what was already done with the EDGE program that they've already expanded for next year, which is an online education system, as well as adopt other settings, because there may be kids who do better in a large classroom environment, as well as kids who do better in a much smaller classroom environment. We need those sort of options for all our kids.
Our sixth question is, with local law enforcement contracts ended, how will the areas of concern that they addressed now be handled?
I really want to see SROs return to the school. And I grew up where there were no cops in school. We only saw a cop if somebody did something wrong. And I would have said, a couple of years ago before becoming a foster parent, that it wasn't needed. But like I said in my introduction, I saw a student who was an at-risk youth develop a great bond with the SRO. And that SRO went out of his way for that kid who was in crisis. And I don't know where she would be if he hadn't have been there. And I think there's other kids who have that story too. So I want to get those SROs back. How that exactly looks, it may not need to look exactly the same as it's been doing, but we need to make sure that we have those sorts of mentors in the school district.
Our seventh and final question. Our school budget has faced monetary issues due to the pandemic, fires, houselessness, technology. What do you propose for meeting these financial challenges?
Really, that's one thing that we need to task our leadership at within the school district itself. The superintendent and her staff are responsible for keeping the budget in line, and they've done a very good job of doing that. The taxpayers pay a lot of money per student in order to educate the kids that are out there. There's probably waste within the system. There's probably things that can be done better and less expensively, and that just needs to be looked at. Within the business world, we look at that all the time. Within my own department, that's what one of the things I have to do is look to see, hey, do I need to do this just because I've always done this before, or does it need to change? Because sometimes the change may be a little challenging, but maybe better suited overall, and maybe less expensive than it was. And it may just be a question of retasking where and what people are doing at different points in time. And that's something that's really the responsibility of the superintendent, but the school board needs to make sure that she and her staff are held accountable to that. And again, I think they've been doing a fairly good job with that at this point.
Now we invite Liam Collins to share his closing remarks and to provide contact information for our viewers.
You know, I'm not a politician. I've never run for political office. I never really envisioned running for political office. But like I said, I saw a need with vulnerable kids not getting what they needed in order to succeed. I've seen multiple kids who are smart kids who weren't doing as well because they didn't necessarily get the connections that they needed to from the school. And I think we as a community and a school district and teachers can all do better to make sure that those kids get that connection that they need in order to be involved, thrive, and do well. I mean, education is their future. They need to understand all these things that go into life, whether that's reading or math or science or wellness or sports. Like, all of these things teach kids lessons, and we need to make sure that kids are involved and connected within the school district. And I think I can help with that, having seen vulnerable kids and things that can really help them. And so I'm asking for everybody's support. And if you want more information, just visit collinsforschoolboard.com and please vote.
Thank you, Liam Collins, for our interview today and for sharing your thoughts. Thanks to Capital Community Media for the extensive efforts made to make this program happen. And thanks to you, the public, for watching in order to become an informed voter. Remember to vote by May 18th because your vote counts.